Now for a look again at the day's top business news with France 24's very own Brian Quinn. Brian Quinn, thank you for being with us again.
My pleasure.
Starting off with an interesting one, the markets in the US rallying after Donald Trump made that statement.
That's right, over on Wall Street. It was a sluggish rally for most of the day, but it really accelerated into the close as Donald Trump announced a public-private partnership with some of America's biggest retail and healthcare companies to launch extensive coronavirus testing. All major indexes nearly recovering their losses from yesterday's 10% drops. We see the Dow Jones and the S&P both up around 9.3%. Same for the NASDAQ. European indexes, though, notched some tepid gains by comparison after double-digit falls for their part yesterday. This despite a raft of fiscal spending measures unveiled Friday. London closing up nearly 2.5%, Paris 1.8%, the DAX in Frankfurt barely eking out 0.75%. All those indexes lost over 10% yesterday. Milan with some solid gains, over 7%, but remember that's after a 17% loss yesterday, so nowhere near making up for it. Well, back in the U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin had urged Americans not to overreact to the market turmoil. He looks to have been right. Here he is on Washington Friday.
Well, my comment is don't stare at the screen, okay? It'll be higher a year from now, as I said. People who weathered the crash in 1987, people who weathered the financial crisis, for long-term investors, the U.S. is the best place to invest in the world. And again, I can't predict where the market is on a daily basis. People should be less concerned about going up and down.
Well, Thursday's steep losses on European markets were sparked in part by what many investors saw as an underwhelming intervention by the European Central Bank, using monetary policy options like corporate bond purchases and negative interest loans. Friday saw European governments and the wider EU bring out the fiscal cavalry with a range of government spending measures, including €500 billion promised by Germany to support the union's #1 economy. But will even that be enough? Colin Kinneber reports.
Saving lives and the economy at any cost. That was the message from European leaders after the bloc's financial markets saw their worst day in more than 30 years. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said this would mean not just a €37 billion investment package, but also relaxing restrictions on deficit spending by the bloc's member states.
They should be encouraged and they should feel comfortable to take all the necessary measures they need to support people. We at the European level are providing maximum flexibility.
Her message was addressed above all to Italy, the new epicenter of the epidemic, where only supermarkets, pharmacies, and newspaper kiosks are still open. Meanwhile, the EU's largest economies announced major stimulus measures of their own. In Germany, Finance Minister Peter Altmaier announced, quote, unlimited credit to businesses, ranging from taxi drivers to large companies. Much the same message in France. Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said that, in addition to compensating employees for losses in pay, the country would extend loan guarantees worth tens of billions of euros to small and medium-sized businesses.
Supply-side politics has never meant, and I have always been very clear on this, that the state is abandoning its protective role. And today it has a role to protect, to defend our companies, to support the economy, and it's going to play it to the fullest.
The EU Commission is warning, though, that such measures may not be enough to prevent a recession, with officials saying growth this year will likely drop below zero, for the first time since 2012.
The coronavirus crisis is already having a huge impact on people's movement across continents, with event cancellations and travel restrictions and quarantines. New industry figures show the travel sector could lose as much as 25% of its business in 2020. Thousands of international flights canceled, with insurance firms suspending travel coverage options. The World Travel and Tourism Council says the situation is increasingly dire for the industry.
Our analysis shows that for the rest of this year, we are likely to lose the equivalent of around 3 months of travel in total. That's going to result in a loss of jobs at risk of between 12 to 14% of the global workforce. And that is why we're saying that up to 50 million jobs are at risk in the sector. So it's a very significant impact.
Well, airlines in particular have been taking drastic measures in the face of cratering demand. British Airways lining up job cuts as CEO Alex Cruz says the company and the industry face a crisis of global proportions. German flagship carrier Lufthansa says it's planning to seek state aid to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Norwegian Air says only a government bailout can keep it from going the way of Britain's Flybe, Europe's largest regional carrier that went bankrupt last week. Shares in European airlines did rebound Friday from Thursday's sell-off, but remained down over 40% for the year. The industry's main trade association says government intervention is likely the only hope for many firms.
We are asking, all the governments who have put restrictions, and the U.S. government particularly, to review the decision permanently to see whether they can alleviate or waive that decision. The sooner the better. Additionally, we are asking governments, to permanently assess the economic consequences of these type of measures. To be conscious that of the negative impact it might have not only on our industry, but on the whole economy.
Well, along with airlines, airplane manufacturers are facing mounting challenges as well. Boeing shares have had their worst week since the 1970s, down by half from their 12-month high. Disruptions caused by the coronavirus are compounding its financial difficulties due to the grounding of 737 MAX planes. Camille Nedelik takes a look.
Already in the doldrums, Boeing's fortunes have taken another turn for the worse, as the aerospace giant is set to fully draw down on a loan of almost $14 billion. It says this is a precautionary move to bolster the company against the impact of coronavirus. Airlines have seen a huge drop in demand for air travel, which in turn has prompted them to delay payments or push back ordering new planes altogether. So far this year, Boeing has had more cancellations than orders, with a net loss of 28 planes. The company had already taken the first $7.5 billion of the loan as it tried to claw its way back into profitability following the Lion Air and Ethiopia Air crashes less than 5 months apart, killing 346 people. Earlier this week, the families of the Ethiopia Air victims marked 1 year since the disaster. The plane maker has said that the crisis is likely to cost over $18 billion. Analysts put costs at over $1 billion a month. But even as Boeing struggles to stay afloat, it's potentially too big to fail. It's one of the world's largest aerospace companies and America's largest exporter. It employs hundreds of thousands of people in the United States, and its suppliers account for another 1.3 million jobs.
Finally, for business, some good news as economic activity in China slowly picks back up. Apple says all 42 of its stores in the country will have reopened as of Friday. The iPhone maker closed all retail stores and offices in China on the 1st of February due to the coronavirus outbreak. First just for a week, but then staying closed for a month. Then was finally getting back to business as the spread of the virus appears to be abating in its original epicenter. Good news for Apple there. Is it good news for the people who work at the Apple factories? I don't know, Sana.
I do not know that, Brian Quinn. Thank you very much for being, we shall do, for being with us.